Hey, what's up, VC? It's Steve again, Harmless Rebel, and it's time for a kind of a metal update. This is kind of a look back at the 90s. I mentioned a couple of weeks ago that I was cleaning out the garage and ran across an old CD case, and I'll actually show it right here. This is an old CD case that I've had since the mid-90s, about 95, 96-ish, and I ran across a bunch of CDs, mostly death metal CDs that I was really into at the time. This is just kind of a look at what I was listening to in 1995 to 1998 time frame as it pertains to heavy metal. It was fun going back and listening to these. This is just the first part of it. I think I've got about 10 CDs here, and there's a bunch more in there, but I figured I'd start with these. Gave them a list, and like I said, it was a lot of fun, a lot of memories in these CDs. Unfortunately, I don't have any of these on vinyl. I would actually love to have most of them on vinyl, but with the exception of 2 or 3, they're all pretty pricey. Even some of these CDs I found out as I was just looking up some general information. A couple of these CDs are $40, $50, which kind of blew me away as well. So let's get started. I kind of touched on this one before, and I had it playing in the background of the video when I showed my office, my room here. This is Metal Blade Records' 15th anniversary. Oops. Sorry, I had a pop up there. This is Metal Blade's 15th anniversary, 82 to 97. Came out in 97. I don't remember how I got this. I don't remember if I bought it. Around that time, I had not a run-in, but I got to meet the owner of Metal Blade Records. He was buying a house in the Phoenix area, and I worked for the mortgage company that was setting it up. I worked in the documents department, so I put together all the paperwork and then filed it for all of the deals that we did within that company. The mortgage broker that worked with him was my next door neighbor, so he knew that I was in a heavy metal band because he heard us practicing nonstop. So he brought me in and introduced me to the guy, and I can't remember his name. I'm sure I should have looked it up. I didn't think about it. I'm sure Aaron knows who he is, but I got to meet him, and he hooked me up with a couple of I don't know if they're media packets or demo packets or exactly. I don't remember what he called them, but they would have CDs, some comps, band comps, promo pictures of the band, informational sheets on the bands, and he gave me 2 envelopes that had information on 3 or 4 bands each, and a couple of comps and demos from each band. I wish I still had all that stuff. I don't remember if this was part of that. I want to say this came out a little while after that, but regardless, very cool experience. Like I said, I wish I still had those. I don't even know what happened to that stuff because it's before I went in the military. But probably in that same time frame, maybe a little later, I got a hold of this. I've mentioned before, I'm a big fan of Metal Blade Records. A lot of my favorite bands from that era were playing on Metal Blade, and there's very few bands from Metal Blade from the 80s and 90s that I didn't like. So regardless, this is a real cool comp. It's a 2 CD comp. It's got bands like Fate's Warning, Hellstar, Warlord, Armored Saint, Cannibal Corpse, Gwar, 6 Feet Under, Merciful Fate, Galactic Cowboys, Lizzie Borden, Omen, Bitch, Trouble. I mean, all the big bands that were on Metal Blade at that time. Real cool one, and as a matter of fact, I don't have any music playing right now, but when I edit the video, I'll probably throw this on in the background, so you should be able to hear that. Next up, this was probably one of my first death metal CDs, and I really liked this CD. I went back and listened to it. It still sounds really good today. That's Master's self-titled debut from 1990. Master had been around for a long time. I don't remember what their original name was, but they got together in like 82 or 83. Was it War Child or something? Was it War Child? War Cry was their original name. And then it was 90 before, I mean, they got signed in 85 as Master, I think, to Combat, but it was 1990 before they finally released an album, and it was this one. And it's a pretty interesting album. I mean, it starts with the Pledge of Allegiance, a death metal Pledge of Allegiance, which is pretty kick-ass. There's a really good cover of Children of the Grave on here as well. And then just some really good death metal as well. Really cool album. Definitely worth checking out if you like death metal. Next up, this was one of the bigger death metal releases of the early 90s. They've redone this, re-released this CD and DVD a number of times. This is Carnage, Dark Recollections. They were a Swedish death metal band. This was from 1990 when this came out. And this is another one, like I said, some of these CDs are worth a lot of money. This one goes for $40 to $45, which kind of blew me away. Good death metal though, they're very anti-Christian. So if that's not your taste, I wouldn't recommend this band. They're not as bad as bands like Deicide and stuff, where it's, I'm not going to get into Deicide, but definitely an anti-Christian band. But still, just classic death metal from 1990. The reason this one is so valuable, this was the very first release that they did. It was very limited. It was when they had first gotten signed, and they were just kind of testing the waters with this album, from what I understand. The way you can tell the difference is this one says Carnage, Dark Recollections in small print on the bottom. All of the additional pressings of this on CD is in big letters across the front. It says Carnage, and then it'll have Dark Recollections underneath it. So if you run across this cover anywhere with the small print in the bottom left-hand corner for cheap, pick it up. If you like death metal, though, again, this is another really good death metal band. So, and this was, I don't think they were the first Swedish death metal band. I want to say that Tiamat was, or Tiamat, however you say it. But they were right there in that same time frame with them. Maybe Entombed. I don't remember if they came out before Entombed or if Entombed came out first. But next up, this one is another one that's a pretty valuable CD. This is Dark Funeral. This was one of the first black metal CDs that I bought from 90, I want to say 95, 94. And this is self-financed. It's on House of Kick Records, which is basically who it was distributed by. I mean, they recorded it, paid for it themselves. It's again, this one goes for $30, $35, and it's because it was a self-financed EP. This one, really good metal. It's not as for this time frame, 94. A lot of the black metal that was coming out was very. The production quality was very bad. The instrumentation wasn't that good. The instrumentation on this is really good. Definitely worth checking out if you're into black metal. This was kind of the beginning of black metal as far as the U.S. market knew. Nowadays we have the internet, and I don't remember who was talking about this just recently on a video. I think it was Brandon, Mr. Hall of Fame. But the kids growing up and listening to black metal and the different genres of metal right now, you can go on the internet and find all this music and find the history of all these bands and stuff. In 93, 94, 95, 90% of the people in the U.S., I would say 98% of the metalheads had never heard of black metal. And it just came down to, you didn't find metal, the magazines didn't talk about black metal yet at that time. You had to know people from those specific scenes. There was a small scene in New York, and I think there was a scene in LA that were into black metal. And the only reason I was introduced to it so early in 94 was because when I left my first band, the drummer who replaced me, Shane, had just moved from New York, and he was real big into the black metal scene, and he was actually in a black metal band in New York before he moved to Phoenix. And he brought some black metal with him, which I found really interesting. Just the different, the instrumentation and the roughness of it, the dirtiness of it. I'm not even going to get into the lyrics of most of the black metal at that time, you know. But this is before anybody really knew the whole history with Burzub and with was it Mayhem, the other band. You know, we didn't find out about all that stuff until later, the church burnings. That wasn't big news here in 94, 95. And he actually set up a distribution deal with a bunch of the record company, or a bunch of the distribution companies in Norway, in Sweden, and he was actually bringing them in, and that's how he made his money, was selling black metal and just word of mouth. You know, he'd meet people and sell albums. And I told him to give me his two favorite that he had, so I could check them out, because I was just kind of putting my foot in the water, so to speak, testing out the water. And he gave me this one, which is again Dark Funeral, and he also gave me Borknagar, and I can't find that one. Borknagar was I really liked that CD. Hopefully I can find that one. That's got to be here somewhere, but this was the other one, like I said, Dark Funeral. So next up, Atrocity. Atrocity, I don't know if they were the first, but they were definitely one of the first technical death metal bands. And I would call them progressive, but they were definitely death metal. When I think of progressive, I think of bands. I can't even think of any from that time frame. I mean, this was 1990. Oh, I think this was 91. Let's see if I can find it on here. I don't even have it on here right now. But this was 90 or 91 when Hallucinations came out. And their band changed quite a bit over the years, but like I said, this was straight up death metal. But they used really progressive drumming, very progressive bass lines, but they never had any clean guitars or clean vocals that you would expect here and there with traditional progressive metal, even progressive death metal. Usually they'll have the growls, but then they'll have some clean vocals here and there. And Atrocity was just straight up death metal. This has some of the most hardcore lyrics. They weren't satanic, they weren't religious. The lyrics of this are about basically drug use, a drug user, his journey, and it's very dark stuff. And it's not a glowing recommendation for drugs, it's quite the opposite. But this is not a good place to start if you're looking to check out some death metal. This is very chaotic upon first listen, and I knew this going in because I remember this being a weird album, but listening to it the first time a couple of days ago, I was like, man, this is terrible. But then as I started listening to it, I started hearing the different time signatures. I started hearing the instrumentation and what they were doing, and I kind of got into it. And it's almost metal made for musicians. As a drummer, I really dug what the drummer was doing. As somebody who used to play bass, I don't consider myself a bassist, but I played bass for a while. I appreciate what the bassist is doing, so still very cool, very worth checking out, especially if you have that grounding in death, you're familiar with death metal, you know the death metal sound, you may want to check it out. But next up, probably one of the biggest death metal bands of the early to mid 90s, Carcass, Heartwork. This is kind of their, I hate to say it because it's what they named their next album, and but this was kind of their Swan Song. Unfortunately, the actual album Swan Song wasn't. Carcass is kind of a weird band in that they started off as a kind of a grindcore or gore grind band, and then they moved into death metal, and then they moved from death metal to melodic death metal, and this was kind of that transition from death metal to melodic death metal right here. An amazing album. I love this album from beginning to end. This was the second Carcass album that I bought. The first one that I bought was Necroticism, which I liked. And then I bought this, and I was just completely blown away by this when it came out. This one was 93, I think, when this one came out. And then they just kind of lost their minds. In 96, they released two albums. The first was Swan Song, which I mentioned a minute ago. which I don't know what they were doing. They just completely, it just was an uncohesive album. There were some good songs on it, don't get me wrong, but it just wasn't of the caliber of their previous releases, or even Surgical Steel, which just came out either earlier this year or late last year. So, but this is great. I mean, if you like thrash, you're gonna like this. If you like death metal, you're gonna like this. It's just a great band, or a great album. And then this was kind of this is Wake Up and Smell the Carcass. This album cover was actually banned in the U.S. When I bought this, it had an all black case, and I don't mean a black sticker on the case. The actual case was all black. All you could read was the side where it said Carcass, Wake Up and Smell the, and it's because of the this is the JFK autopsy photo. But again, this is a pretty cool album in the way they did it. So the first couple songs are from Swan Song, which I just mentioned. There are, like I said, there are 3 or 4 good songs on that album, and they're on this album as well. And then it's also got the BBC sessions, 4 songs from the BBC sessions. It's got 2 songs from the Heartwork EP, which is another amazing album. Tools of the Trade, it's got 3 songs from that. Again, another amazing. That came out just prior to Heartwork, if I remember correctly. And then it's also got, let's see, a couple of, from earlier comps, a couple of songs, and those are the more, the last couple are the more grindcore, early Carcass. But it's a really good kind of, it's not a greatest hits, it's more of kind of a retrospective. It actually starts with their newer stuff and ends with their oldest stuff from 1988 and 1989. So that's a cool one to have as well. And that was very well played when I got this. For about 6 months after that, this was all that you heard if you got into my car. The next 2 are just heavy metal classics. These are from 1990 and 1992. Tampa Band, Obituary. You've got Cause of Death and Incomplete. I can't really pick one over the other. And I'm trying to think here. Maybe it wasn't one of these. It must be going back to, was it Carnage? It was, give me a sec. I can't remember if it was Carnage or not. Maybe it was Atrocity. Atrocity was actually recorded in Tampa with Scott Burns and produced by Scott Burns, who also produced almost all of the Florida death metal, including the Obituary albums, most of the 6 Feet Under stuff. Pretty much everything that came out of Florida was produced by Scott Burns. He also produced the Atrocity album. And I forgot to mention, this also includes their first album. This is their first album. They actually released an EP about 3 years before it, and the songs from that EP are the last couple songs on Atrocity. But next up is, like I said, Obituary. These are, in my opinion, their 2 best albums. I haven't heard their new album. It just dropped, I believe, this week, or it's about to drop. I kind of lost interest after these 2 albums. I thought these were really good. It seemed like every album after that, they were just trying to get this sound, you know, and it just never worked out that well again. And I don't know if Scott Burns stuck with them. I know that he produced both of these, but regardless, Obituary, both killer albums. I definitely recommend those to just about anybody. Next up, as we mentioned, is 6 Feet Under. Another Tampa band. 6 Feet Under is actually a super group. It's got Chris Barnes from Cannibal Corpse and Alan West. Not to be confused with the former Florida senator, but Alan West from Obituary. This was kind of a side project they did. This, I want to say, was their second full length. Don't quote me on that. Good album though. A lot of people don't like this one. It's actually Warpath is the title of the album. But One interesting thing about this is on the song 420, sorry, my allergies are really bugging me today. This is the first CD where you can actually hear Chris Barnes singing clean vocals, and it was on the song 420. There's 4 or 5 really good songs on here. 420 is good, and then what's the other? I can't think of the other. There was one other song I really liked on here, and it's not coming to me. But regardless, definitely worth checking out. And then last but not least is Coroner. A little bit of swish, I can't even say it, Swiss thrash. And with this album, they had almost made the complete transition into progressive metal. I think this is by far their best album. This is Mental Vortex. Just a killer album through and through. This is one I highly recommend. That of all of these, most of these other ones, if you're not into death metal, it's not going to be for you. This one, it doesn't matter what kind of metal you listen to, you'll like this album. This album's amazing. Killer progressive thrash, technical thrash, however you want to say it. It's just this was by far their best album. Their 3 albums before this were really good as well. The production and the sound quality just wasn't as good. With this one, it's amazing production. Everything just sounds really good. They were putting all the pieces together. You know, they had touched on the progressive stuff in earlier albums. They just hadn't made it work yet. And with this one, they definitely get it all together and just comes out with this. I think it's a masterpiece myself. That's it, VC. Again, I mean, it went a little longer than I wanted to, but again, this is just kind of my youth. I was actually playing in the Phoenix scene. I was in a band called Siege at the time. And this was the stuff that that myself and the members of my band were listening to, even though we were more a straight up metal band. This was the kind of stuff that we were listening to while we were drinking and doing other stuff when we weren't playing. So I hope you enjoyed it. Leave your comments. Tell me what you think. And give me your thoughts on these bands as well. Take care, VC.